All right, class, 2.4, our fourth and final lesson here, multiplying and dividing with rational numbers. So again, same pattern here, trying to think of the word, same pattern here, we're using the same rules as from chapter 1. So when we multiplied and divided integers, that was our positive and negative whole numbers, when they had the same sign, it was positive. And when they had different signs, it was negative. That holds true for rational numbers as well. We're now just dealing with fractions and decimals, not whole numbers. So go ahead, fill that in, and let's just a quick reminder of those rules. Next, what I want to remind you of are how do we multiply with fractions, how do we divide with fractions, how do we multiply decimals, and how do we divide decimals. So a quick review here. Multiplying fractions. Remember, we multiply straight across the numerator and the denominator. When we divide with fractions, we do keep, change, flip. A lot of us like to do like KCF is that acronym we might be thinking of. Keep the first number, change division to multiplication, and then flip that second fraction. What about if we are multiplying decimals? Remember, the decimals do not have to line up. Okay, we would just kind of stack them. We'd multiply like we normally would, and then we're going to move that decimal back into the product. So however many numbers there are behind the decimal point, that's how many we move it back in. And we'll review that in a few. And then dividing decimals. The first number goes in the box, the second number is on the outside. The outside number, we have to remember to move that decimal until it's a whole number. And then we'll also move the decimal inside to keep it consistent and the same. Again, this probably you need to see it to remember if you forget. So we'll review that as well. So let's review those skills, put them into practice, but also pay attention to our signs as well. So we're going to kind of do it all at once. So let's take a look at number 1 here. We're multiplying fractions. I know we're multiplying because they're next to each other. So reminder, when they're next to each other, that's multiplication. Or when you see kind of those parentheses in that second number, you might not see a multiplication sign or anything, but they're being multiplied. So how do we multiply fractions? We're going to go straight across the numerator and then straight across the denominator. So 2 times 2 is 4. 5 times 3 is 15. Now pay attention to your sign. I see a positive and I see a negative. So those are different signs, which means our answer should be negative. You always want to ask yourself, can I simplify? If you can, you would simplify, but in this case, we can't. So that is our final answer. Doesn't matter if I put that negative. You might say, why'd you put it in the numerator? Doesn't matter if it's in the numerator, if you have it kind of just right out front, or if you even put it in the denominator. That all reads the same thing. Just as a little side note for you. Let's go down. Let's practice now dividing fractions. And then we'll go over next. So when we divide fractions, there's that nice acronym. We're going to do KCF. Keep, change, flip. We keep that first fraction exactly the same. Right now it's a negative 1/3. We're going to keep it a negative 1/3. We change division to multiplication. Now we want to flip this fraction, but first, before we can flip it, right now it's a mixed number. I can't flip it that way. You need to make it improper and then flip that. So let's change this to an improper fraction. So remember, to make it improper, we multiply our denominator times our whole number. So 3 times 2 is 6. add our numerator. 6 plus 2 is 8. Keep your same denominator. We'll keep it, my alarm's going off. We'll keep it negative. So it's a negative 8/3. Now, when we go to flip it, all we're doing is flipping our numerator and our denominator. We're keeping the sign. Nothing happens with your sign here. So now I'm multiplying negative 1/3 times a negative 3/8. This is a 3. Let me tidy that up a little for you. Now we're just multiplying fractions, same as what we did up here. Multiply across your numerator and across your denominator. Some of us might be noticing if you do a special kind of step here. So I would get 3, and then 3 times 8 is 24. But some of you might have noticed that I can cross simplify or cross cancel. And if you do it that way, that's totally fine. When you're multiplying fractions, you can look diagonally, and if I can simplify anything before I multiply, some of us like to do that. And then I just get 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 8 is 8, which again, if I just went across before, I would get 3/24, but then I have to ask myself, can I simplify? The answer is yes, it would simplify to 1/8. So you end up with 1/8 either way you do it. Now a negative times a negative, same signs, means our answer is going to be positive. So we get a positive 1/8 here. Let's practice multiplying decimals. So again, when two numbers are right next to each other, that shows us it's multiplication. They're being multiplied. In order to multiply, you just stack them on top of each other. You don't have to line up the decimals. Now in this case, they're going to line up, but I didn't do that on purpose. You just stack them on top of each other. And now we're going to multiply, kind of just ignore that decimal and multiply the way you normally would. So I would kind of think of this as 63 times 6. So I'm going to do 3 times 6 is 18, carry my 1. Now 6 times 6 is 36, plus 1 gives me 37. I'm going to move over to this 0, but remember you hold the place value, but 0 times 3 is 0, 0 times 6 is 0. Maybe you knew to kind of just skip that step altogether. So you get 378. But this is where we're not done. This is where you now have to kind of go back to your decimal and decide. You have to bring it back into your answer. Count up how many numbers are to the right of your decimal points. How many total numbers? Well, I have 1 in this and 1 here. So that's 2 total. So what that means is I'm going to move my decimal back in twice to the left. So you always start at the end of your number and move to the left. So my decimal would be here. So my answer is 3 7/78. Now double check your sign. A negative times a negative would in fact give me a positive. Hopefully that's a nice refresher of multiplying decimals. Just remember, all we're doing is adding in that skill of multiplying and dividing with positives and negatives. The actual multiplying with decimals should not be a new skill. None of this should be a new skill besides now we're adding in that positive and negative signs. All right, dividing with decimals. Let's remember how to do this. So I told you the steps up here. The first number is going to go in the box. So I'm looking right at my directions here. And you can refer to that when you need to. So my first number goes in the box. So if I'm drawing my division bar, negative 5.2 goes inside. Divided by that second number goes on the outside. When we divide, we don't like to divide with decimals. So we need to make them whole numbers. Your number that you go off of to make it a whole is the outer number. You're going to move this until it is a whole number, which means it's to the right of that number. So I just have to move it once. If I move that outer number once, I need to move the decimal on the inside the same number of times. So now my decimal is on the outer edge. I would bring that right up so that it's ready to go in my answer, so I don't forget about it. But now what you really have is 52 being divided by 2. And if you need to, go ahead and rewrite it so you don't have all these arrows and kind of decimal points in your way. If you want to rewrite it so it's neater, you're really just dividing 2 into 52. So now how many times can 2 go into 5? Twice. So 1, bring my 2 down. How many times can 2 go into 12? 6. Now remember, your decimal is at the end. It should be right up here. Don't forget about that. And 2 times 6 is 12. So that would make that a 0 for me. Now pay attention to your sign. A negative being divided by a positive gives me a negative 26 as my final answer here. So take your time to write all that down. Hopefully that was a nice refresher of how to divide with decimals. Actually, I hope it was a nice refresher. All of these examples we reviewed multiplying and dividing fractions and decimals. All we did now was add in those signs and that skill, same sign positive, different signs negative. Let us know if you have any questions. Hopefully you have that all written down and filled in your notes. Thank you.